family and sexual violence, you know that you actually have to do something to prevent it. So
The connection between going upstream and intersectionality. But when you add the layer of tech and workplace and how the sexual harassment and then violence is impacted, and you have done some work in that front, do you mind sharing a bit more? Uh, what are the initial impacts you have, and then what are the outcomes you are trying to achieve with that program?
yeah, thanks, Dev. Um, and thank you for having me on Wajak Country. I'm so grateful to be here. So, Full Stop Australia works in domestic, family, and sexual violence. We run helpline services 24 hours a day across Australia, and then specifically our sexual violence helpline in New South Wales. So, for the last 52 years, we've been listening to the stories of primarily, but not only, women who've been subject to sexual assault and domestic and family violence. And over, we hear about the harms that caused. And as a result, I think the founders of our organisation set us up and said, you need to do three things. You need to respond, you need to advocate for change to laws and systems, and you need to change community attitudes. And so we work primarily in the response space, but actually we do a lot of our own generated work around education and prevention, because when you've heard that many stories of the deep harm that's caused by domestic, family and sexual violence, you know that you actually have to do something to prevent it. So a lot of our work in the prevention space is really targeted at adults. And I just want to say it's really important that we focus on children and young people. But we all know that particularly technology-enabled harm is being perpetrated with enthusiasm by adults. So we talk about young people, and the social media delay is an important response to that. There's a whole range of other things. But let's remember that adults are using these platforms for harm. And the gendered nature of harm, which my colleagues have already referenced, so that women are targeted online in very particular ways. And most importantly, First Nations people and culturally and linguistically diverse people are targeted in very particular ways as well. So that when you put together virulent online racism, which is real and causing extreme harm in communities and in workplaces, and then you add that gendered lens, and women, young women in particular, women generally, and LGBTQIA plus communities are getting like layers of severe online harm. So some of the things we're working on, we work in the prevention space with workplaces to work with them around how to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace. And you might say, what's that got to do with, the online environment? Well, much of that these days, a lot of the online sexual harassment in the workplace is occurring. So we're working on cultural change, on attitudinal change, in order to prevent the harm occurring in the first place, but also to equip workplaces with the skills to respond effectively when it occurs, and to invite people to share. I'll just finish on this, but the Australian National Research Organisation for Women's Safety did a study on the use of online sexual harassment, and they interviewed people who'd used the online environment to perpetrate sexual harassment. Sidebar, if you ask people that have used harm, they'll tell you about what they've done. So it's good to ask. The people that used harm in the workplace, like sexually use online technologies to sexually harass colleagues, essentially, they knew what they were doing.
Mhm.
They did it with a purpose, and they were perfectly happy to talk about it. So we know that these, as in our modern workplaces, a lot of our communication, a lot of our support relies on, using online technologies, many of which have freed us from, ridiculous requirements to be in particular rooms at particular times. But they are being weaponized, and they're being particularly weaponized against women, First Nations women and culturally diverse women in rates that are deeply disturbing and with intent. So we work to try and, encourage workplaces to put in place the sort of training and support that addresses the positive duty to end sexual harassment that's embedded in the Human Rights Act. In the federal human rights legislation, because we know that that's causing harm. But I think my colleagues have said we've got to go right back to the beginning as well and make sure that that gendered violence, and I would add, explicit racist violence, are also being regulated and addressed by those people who have designed systems. So we've got harm by design at the moment. I think Danielle's given a beautiful example of harm by design. What we need to do is make sure that we're holding all of the companies that create these sort of environments to a safety by design requirement, and make sure that we regulate them and reward good work in safety, and that we actually penalise harm by design.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Thanks a lot.